Well, it is week 3 of our kindness challenge. How you doing? Are you beginning to notice your negative thinking? Yeah, kind of pops up more than we think, doesn't it? And it's been pretty interesting this week on social media, also national media, watching all of the political stuff. And I've been really surprised by the number of negative posts on both sides. And I found myself in a little bit of judgment about the people posting. And then I realized, yeah, that's a little negativity there. Another opportunity to practice my kindness, right? So that's how that stuff sneaks up on us. That's how it works, isn't it? We have these negative thoughts and then we think we're being positive, but yet we're in judgment, so we're being negative. So that was where I was catching myself in some of that this week. And it's another opportunity, as I say, to practice nixing the negatives. And that's my title, my talk today is Nixing the Negatives. And we're going to look at some of the common ways that we unintentionally, because I don't think any of us are intentionally negative or unkind. But these are some ways that are a little sneaky that can sneak up on us if we're not paying attention. So the author of our book of the month, Shanti Feldhahn, tells us the 7 common ways in her kindness challenge that we are sometimes negative, unintentionally. And if you remember, the first step of the challenge is say nothing negative either to your person or about them to anyone else. Nothing negative to your person or about them to anyone else. And in the interest of science of mind, we added, don't think anything negative, right? Don't think anything negative. In actual practice, this can seem a little tough, right? To really block and change those negative feelings that we've had, because many of us have bought into the idea in society that we need to vent. We need to get it off our chest, right? We need to vent. You'll feel better. Yeah. Well, according to the research that Shanti has done, that's just not true. She says that what happens when we are venting about a situation to someone else, we're actually reliving it. The stress, the anger, the frustration, all of the things that happened in the situation, when we retell that story, our body's going through the same thing that we did before. And that can't be good for us, the person we're sharing that with, the person we're sharing that about, and anybody else that might be within earshot, right? It can't be good for any of us. We know that in the science of mind, of course, that we're all connected. We talked about that in our prayer just this morning. We're all connected in this infinite web of life, that we're all connected in God, universal energy, spirit, whatever we call this. And we share this common unity with everyone. So if this is true, and it is, right? It is true, then venting about anything is damaging to everything, isn't it? Yeah. But you may be thinking, now, Reverend Jill, somebody done gone and done me wrong. I have a right. I am justified, right? And this may be true. There are horrific things that happen to us. There are horrific things that happen to us. But according to Shanti's research, remember, she's a researcher first. And according to her research, we absolutely do need counsel, sharing with a trusted friend, to come to resolution, to come to solution, not to simply vent and dump. That's really been her analysis in her research, that we go to someone and we say, look, I've got a situation that has just happened to me and I feel very violated, I feel hurt, I feel frustrated, and I'm not sure quite what to do with it. I'd like to share it with you and get your feedback on it to help me see it perhaps in a different light. Now that's real different from going, did you know what that so-and-so just did? Let me tell you all about it. A little different energy, isn't there? Yeah, a little different energy in that. So complaining about it just makes us part of the problem. No, we've all heard that. Don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. And that's really her point here. And when we're complaining and venting to somebody else about something that's happened, anybody else in earshot, and maybe even that person, might think we're a little nuts. If you've read any social or even listened to national media, you might have not shared a perspective with someone that is sharing. And you might have thought they're a little nuts. Well, the same is true of us. When we are venting to someone about something that happened and around us, people are thinking, that's kind of odd, right? So that's another thing to look at. Now, Shanti tells several stories in the book about how people have a pattern to their reactions. Would you agree? You just kind of know how your mom was going to react when you did a certain thing, or perhaps your father or your 10th grade math teacher, right? We know how people are going to react when certain things happen. And she tells a lot of stories about this. And we may have an unrecognized default button or pattern that causes us to react unkindly. And that's what she's really getting at in these different ways that she's explaining to us. And recognize, of course, that many of these are based in fear that may have been created from past relationships or even childhood, right? But like I shared in the beginning, there's certain things we're not aware of sometimes until we dig into some of these and go, oh, I've done that. I've experienced that, or I've witnessed that. So as we move through her findings this morning, her different ways, I want to invite you to consider your own default responses that you may have. Just kind of bring those gently into mind and think about how you might be able to shift that in your experience. If you've got a particular person or a coworker, whatever, that you have had challenges with, or a relationship that you'd like to see improved, maybe bring that to mind as we go through this and think about how you might be able to handle that differently. See if any of these common ways of being unkind are familiar to you. Maybe you've experienced them, or maybe you've delivered them. I know I certainly found some gems in here for myself. So last week we touched on exasperation. If you were with us, Shanti shared in the book that that's her big thing, is the big eye roll and the big sigh, and that she continues to work on that. And that may be the response, that someone says something or is sharing something and we just kind of go, uh-huh. I have a pretty powerful eye roll. Yeah. A sigh. You know, there's a gentleman in my office that I can hear him sigh across the room and I know something's going on, right? Or maybe it's a huff, right? People do that and you kind of go, oh, what happened? What did I do? And that's the response, because the receiver usually thinks, I've done something wrong, right? I've done something wrong. And we have to recognize that we have those patterns, because those are habits. Those are habits. We have to recognize them, and then we have to work towards changing them. So when I feel myself compelled to roll my eyes, I stop and I do something else. I'll take a deep breath. I'll try to smile maybe instead. Do something different other than roll my eyes at the comment or situation or person, right? Ways we can be more kind. Now, I grew up with a saying, if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all, right? Anybody else have that one growing up? Yeah. Well, turns out it's true. It's good advice. And another way that we're being unkind is when we're grumbling, complaining, being grouchy, critical, dissatisfied, or discontented. Yeah? Now, the receiver of all this joy from us perceives these as judgment for having done something wrong. For having done something wrong. I've set them off. I've done something wrong. And this is familiar to me because as a kid, my dad was a borderline grouch most of the time. Most of the time. And of course, as a little kid, I always thought I had done something to displease him, right? So get out of the line of fire. But as an adult, I realized he hated his job. And so every day when he came home from work, he was just grouchy and cranky because he just didn't enjoy what he was doing. But I didn't know that as a little kid. So I had that association with that. So it's important for us to recognize those things in our lives. Now, you may have a very good reason for being grouchy, discontented, unhappy, right? Maybe you had a rough day at work and you come home. And Zig Ziglar used to say, don't come home and kick the dog, right? Don't take it out on the dog. Don't take it out on the family, right? A different approach, rather than just being grouchy and discontented, might be to say, hey, I've had a rough day. It's just, I need to go take a shower and relax and calm down for a few minutes, and try to change that. Talk about it. Have a conversation about it. The next time you find yourself grumbling, grouching, any of those types of things, practice that old acronym HALT. Ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I, what's the T for? Tired? Am I tired? And if we are any of those things, recognize that it's a physical symptom of your body and take care of it. If it's not, then, if the other person maybe has made a mistake and you're being a little cranky about their mistake, rather than being cranky, explain it. Explain it. Explain what your needs are. I'm really upset that you left the, cheese on the counter all day, right? Explain whatever it is that happened rather than being grumpy about it. And the next one we want to talk about is one that we see a lot. TV, movies, our personal lives, not to mention every sitcom on television. Sarcasm, right? Sarcasm. And some of it's funny, some of it not so much. It can be kind of cutting. I have a family member whose marriage relationship is pretty grounded in sarcasm. They really pick at each other most of the time. And I didn't realize why I was so uncomfortable being around them for so many years until I was reading this information from Shante. She says sarcasm usually comes from a place of truth and criticism couched in humor. And I guess the sarcasm that I've experienced with them has always been very critical. It's always been very critical and uncomfortable. It's like Shakespeare said, many a true word is spoken in jest. Many a true word is spoken in jest. And the unfortunate thing is that our minds don't know the difference. Neuroscience tells us that our minds don't know the difference in a visualization and in reality, something that we're actually experiencing. So in the case of this marriage, I experienced them as being rather shallow in their relationship because it's not very loving and kind when I experience them. It's always, like I say, very picking and deep. So sarcasm can be a barrier to us getting deeper with someone in a conversation. Think of where you might be using sarcasm in your life. Think of where you might be using that as a shield, maybe, to protect ourselves. That's one way we can use it. Another way that we can use it is a way of indirectly trying to express our feelings without directly saying them. Now, we've talked in the past about using humor to get our point across, but using humor and using sarcasm is a fine line. We need to be careful of that the sarcasm doesn't become cutting, right? One way to know that is to watch the reaction of the person that's receiving it. If they get defensive, you've hit a nerve, right? You've hit a nerve. Something's happened. You've gone too deep. If they get defensive, pause and have a conversation about it. Pause and have a conversation about it. Another way that we can be unkind is when we become bitter. Do you know any bitter people? They're just bitter. They hold a grudge. And maybe they are keeping score in their relationship. And this is unkind behavior and become an indication that there's some forgiveness work that needs to happen there. Particularly if it's something that's very old or very powerful in our lives where we need to really do that deeper forgiveness work. If this is something new that's occurring, maybe it's in a job and you've got a big project that's happening and you've stayed late 5 nights this week and your partner hasn't stayed late once. Well, you can become bitter about that, feeling abused about that if we don't have that conversation, right? So that's one way that we can start keeping score. I've stayed 5 nights, you haven't stayed any. Or maybe I've taken the trash out 3 nights and you've only taken it out once. You know, we start keeping score. We start keeping score. Not my job, honey. So this scorekeeping can be destructive a habit to get into because it does create that idea of a balance sheet, right? And part of the kindness challenge is generosity. Part of the kindness challenge is being generous, not to the point of being used or abused by your business partner not showing up to carry their full weight, right? But if you have a conversation with that partner, you may find out they've got massive struggles at home. Maybe the other spouse has to work in the evenings and they've got to be home at a certain time to take the kids so that the other spouse can get to work on time. Maybe there's an illness. Maybe something else is going on. But we've jumped into this idea of keeping score and making them wrong for doing what they did rather than having that conversation. So these are ways that we can become bitter and we can be unkind. So we want to have constructive conversations as opposed to critical ones, right? That's more kind. We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out. Why can't you see what you're doing to me? I would sing it, but when you don't believe a word I say. Oh, Elvis, heartthrob. Sorry, honey. Have you ever dealt with a suspicious person? That can be so draining, can it? You feel like you're always on your guard. If there is evidence in your life leading you to be suspicious, rather than becoming suspicious about it and letting it eat away, have the conversation, right? Have the conversation. Shanti says, when we are suspicious, we usually believe the worst of people's intentions. That is completely the opposite of the science of mind, isn't it? To believe the worst of intentions. We believe we're all spiritual beings, connected in the oneness, wholeness, and unity of life. And we believe the best of each other, that we're doing the best that we can, that we have the best of intentions. And she says that suspicion is usually believing the worst of people's intentions. It worms its way inside our hearts and comes out our mouths as negativity. So this is an area that we can also prove that spiritual principle of what we focus on expands. Because once there's one thing, then you begin to see evidence everywhere for that thing, right? And it grows and it expands until it just eats away at us. And we become unkind in relation to that. So that's one other area where we can be unkind. If you're naturally suspicious, recall that definition. That we believe the worst of people's intentions. And affirm instead, my friend, my coworker, my husband, my wife, my minister, my president, have the best intentions in this moment. They have the best intentions in this moment. Finally, do you believe the glass is half empty or half full? Now, most of us in Science of Mind are going to say, it's half full, right? But sometimes we can go into that idea of half empty. Catastrophizing is what she calls it. And I wasn't really familiar with this. This is kind of the opposite of what Science of Mind teaches. But it's believing the worst is always going to happen and trying to prevent it. Trying to prevent it. Any control freaks in the room or online? Yeah, that's one of our things that feeds us, isn't it? Oh, something bad's going to happen. I can see it coming. I know it. Oh my gosh, when they did this, this is going to happen, then that's going to happen, and I got to fix it. I got to fix it. Yeah, I know this well. I know this well. We believe that there is an impending disaster, which makes us remarkably unkind because we go into that first responder attitude and we can become very unkind in that. We can see how their decision is going to break the entire system. Oh my gosh. What will we do? I must save the day at all cost. We worry, we blame, we try to control, we try to fix. And again, I hadn't heard of this term, but I do know it. I find myself looking ahead for risks on the horizon. I'm kind of like a Girl Scout. Now, some people appreciate that, some people don't. And I hadn't realized how unkind it is until I was reading this work. If someone comes in with a new idea in the office sometimes, their dream, I immediately look at it and look for all the risks of why it won't work. It's my job to help them see the hazards and the pitfalls in front of them, right? I want them to be successful, but let me show you all the things and the reasons it's not going to work. I didn't realize how unkind that was. Did not realize how unkind that was, how dream squashing that can be to someone that has an idea that says, let's try it this way. Right? Yeah. So one of the things that we can do in that situation is to become more mindful, to recognize we do it, to become more mindful, to practice being in the present moment with some deep breathing. Bring our awareness into the present. What's important here? What's really important here is the dream and the creativity, not my fear. Their dream, their creativity. And use the 3 steps. I think the 3 steps are very helpful in this situation. Say nothing negative. Right? Say nothing negative. Say something affirmative. That sounds awesome. I can't wait to see how you're going to unveil that. Say something affirmative. And then do something generous. Let me know how I can help you. Whatever I can do to help you. So we can use those 3 steps in that way also. Each of these will shift our perspective so that we can let go of the superhero cape and become kinder. Become kinder. So remember that when any of these ways of being unkind show up, we may be justified in our feelings. We may be very justified in our feelings. We may feel attacked. We may feel harmed in some way. We may feel we've been treated unkindly. We may be very justified in that. But it is the pattern of an unkind response that we need to look at. It's a saying that if you want to see what someone's made of, see how they respond when you shake them up a little bit. And that's sort of where this work is leading us, is to recognize these patterns of response that we have, our knee-jerk, our reactions, and to, if they're unkind, to be able to recognize them as such and to change them. So let's look at a little example. Consider a pet peeve that you have. Anybody have a pet peeve? Everybody have a pet peeve? Sure we do, right? We've all got one. Bring it to mind. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's your person that you're working with. Maybe it is a coworker that leaves dirty dishes in the sink all the time, right? You want to post a sign. Your mom doesn't work here. Wash your dishes, right? Not kind. And maybe it's drivers. Maybe you live with a neat freak. Maybe you are a neat freak and you live with someone that's not. Whatever that is, bring that to mind. Let's say you're on the freeway. You got a tailgater pull up behind you. You really don't like tailgaters. You've got a programmed response to them. Maybe you start grumbling and grouching and saying unkind words. What was it Dr. Spock said in Star Trek? Colorful metaphors? Yeah, that's it. Saying colorful metaphors to your windshield or your rearview mirror. Right? Maybe you take action and even tap your brakes. Oh my. Well, what if you change that response? A lot of times tailgaters will come up behind us and there's a lane that they can go around and we get all indignant and it's like, well, just pass me, go in the other lane. But why don't we go in the other lane? Simply move over to the other lane and gently wave. Not a one-finger salute, a wave and a smile, right? What if we change the energy? Can you feel your blood pressure and the cortisol and all of that stuff go down just even thinking about that response versus focusing on the rearview mirror, the person on your bumper, and complaining and grouching and maybe running into the car in front of you because you're watching your rearview mirror too much, right? So these are ways that we can change these patterns of response that we have. The unconscious responses take us out of the driver's seat of our lives. They take us out of that. And again, this negative impact of cortisol on our bodies, on our personal health. We know what that does to us with extensions of cortisol and the stress hormone in our bodies. So this is healthier for us to practice kindness. And it's also healthier for universal consciousness because we're contributing more kindness into the overall universal consciousness. Shanti sums up negativity in this way. She says, what we notice, see, and focus on is what will either illuminate our whole being or darken it. If what we see and say is full of light and positivity, we will be full of light and positivity. But if what we notice, see, and say is dark, dissatisfied, critical, sarcastic, irritated, suspicious, or angry, we ourselves will be all those things. We are charged to focus on the light, not the dark. Now that sounds very familiar to all of us in New Thought, doesn't it? Follow the light, not the darkness. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind, tells us automatically you get rid of the negatives by implanting of positives. Negatives cannot exist when positives fill the space. When the sunshine of love and confidence fills your whole being, the darkness of the negatives has to disappear. It has to disappear. And of course, we could not end without Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in his famous speech, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." 3 powerful quotes around the idea of being the light, And today I'm going to invite us to nix the negatives in our life, and to be that light, because the world needs your brightness today. So let's wrap up with some spiritual practices and see how we might practice nixing the negatives in our life and show up as more kindness in our world. And don't forget Mindful Monday. If you haven't signed up for that email list and you'd like to receive that, you can do so in the lobby, or if you're online, you can just send us an email and we'll get you signed up on the list to receive that also. So number 1 is to continue the 3 steps of the kindness challenge. If you haven't joined it, you can join it anytime. You can go onto her website. You can get her daily reminders. You can buy the book. We've got those available here in the bookstore. And we've got the 3 steps in a little handout for you in the lobby also. The first is say nothing negative. The second is say something positive. And the third is do a small act of kindness or generosity. And you can practice those throughout your day. Number 2 is rein in the venting. Rein in the venting. And I really think this is one of the best points of her book, is to recognize the disservice we do to ourselves when we simply vent. Do you remember the show Nickelodeon when that was, I don't know if it's still on or not, but it came out several years ago with the kids show, and they had the green slime, and they would slime their guests with green slime. I have no idea what was in that stuff, but they slimed everybody. And if you kind of think about that visual, that that's what we're doing when we're venting. We're sort of just putting green slime out on the person we're venting to, the person we're venting about, and anybody else within earshot around us that can hear us. So think about that and use spiritual practices, prayer and meditation, perhaps journal. Ask yourself, why do I feel like I need to share this? Why do I feel like I need to vent and get this out? Am I seeking counsel and resolution? Or am I seeking validation that, yeah, I've been wrong. Ain't it awful? What are my motivations? What am I seeking here? And also, how can I handle this different next time? How can I handle it differently next time? And again, you can go to jointhekindnesschallenge.com/resources, and Shanti's got a video up there that talks about this idea of nixing the negatives, goes through these different scenarios that she has in the book. That's video number 2. And number 3 spiritual practice is practicing that pause. Practicing that pause. And just taking that half a breath long enough to catch the negative thought before it comes out our mouth, to recognize if we're doing one of these unkind behaviors, and to shift or change that perhaps. We know that the first step in changing anything in our lives is to become aware that it needs to change. And so becoming aware of how many negative thoughts, or if we're about to be unkind in some way, allows us the opportunity to consciously then change that. What is the kindest thing I can do in this situation? What is the kindest thing I could do here? How can I handle it differently? And then, if you're really bold, make a deal with yourself this week that if you catch yourself being unkind or recognize you were unkind, go back and clean it up. Go back and apologize. I think I was unkind to you a few moments ago in our conversation, and I'd like to apologize. And what I'd rather say is this, or what I meant was this. And clean it up right there. What's going to happen to that relationship? It's going to be transformed, isn't it? Both parties. That's a bold move. I invite you to try it. All right, so nixing the negatives is not about the mainstream approach that most of us have been practicing of boundaries and battle, right? That's how many relationships are. I've got to have my boundaries. And if you violate my boundaries, I've got to have my battles, right? I've got to have my battles. And that's not what this is about. It's about changing our thinking and changing our way of being and choosing to be kind anyway. We have our Scottsdale CSL t-shirts in the lobby, and that's one of the little sayings on them is be kind anyway, even to the unkind. And that's tough, isn't it? Because they're being unkind. I need to meet that energy with the same energy. That's not part of our kindness challenge this month. It's being kind anyway, kind to the unkind, even when we're feeling inconvenienced, frustrated, even angry. Tough stuff, deeper work. It's not about being a doormat. We've said that all month long. It's not about that. It is about choosing a kinder way to express ourselves, to be constructive instead of critical, to be kind instead of condescending. So if you've got a relationship with a person that isn't quite what you'd like it to be, take the challenge. Try it for 30 days. See what happens. Can always go back. Can always go back at the end of the 30 days. So I want to close this today with a quote from Shanti from the book. And she says, "You will find that as you gain the new habit of nixing the negativity, something remarkable happens. You will have a lighter heart, greater peace, and more enjoyment of your life and relationships. and you will see more constructive and powerful outcomes of your efforts in the world. Good side effects. My invitation to us this week is to choose kindness. Choose kindness. So would you join me for an affirmative prayer this morning? As we just breathe in, we breathe all of this idea of kindness into our hearts, allowing them to open, to expand, to be the light in the world. And we recognize that light is love. That light and that place in our hearts that we feel that opens up is spirit. It is God. It is the infinite love that created all that is. All that is in this physical form is created of that divine love. And all of that divine love is within each of us right here, right now. Seeking expression through us. Through kind words and gestures. Through healthy relationships. And through joy and peace. And we know that we have within us all of that. And so today we just simply immerse ourselves in it and allow ourselves to be that expression of the divine, the expression of God, the expression of wholeness and the magnificence of spirit that we are. Letting go of fear, letting go of anything that holds us back from that expression of divine life, that expression of kindness, that expression of joy. Just stepping powerfully into the magnificence that we are. And I know for anyone that has anything on their heart today, that they are seeking prayer support around or answers or any need at all, that whatever that is, as they bring it into the forefront of their minds, that is lifted into the power of this prayer, and that we each individually and collectively hold that in this highest love, knowing the manifestation of whatever that need is, if it's love, if it is peace, if it is flow and prosperity, if it is healing, whatever it is, we know, claim, and accept here today the manifestation of that. And how grateful I am for this knowing the power of prayer as we join in it today, knowing the manifestation of this prayer. As I release this into the action and activity of law, knowing that it is done, for we know that the word spoken is the word made manifest. And we affirm it today as we say, and so it is.